Hey, I'm super happy you guys had a light lunch, so you'll be very energetic for my talk. Sorry for my voice, I got hit in the throat by a GitHub drink up last night, so I'm a little harsh. I have water though, which you need to live. So I'm Flip. It's nice to meet you guys. Here's some information about me, a bunch of URLs you will never visit. So that's exciting. My company's Back 40, we're a consulting firm in Baltimore. And I'm going to talk to you about inventing stuff. Or more importantly, a concept I call actually invented here. Which is, this talk is a paean to reinventing the wheel. Now, paean is a word that I've only ever read, so I don't know how it's pronounced. And I looked it up, and Apple's little pronunciation thing had like the upside down E on it. And I don't know how that's pronounced, so if any of you guys know how that's pronounced, let me know. But anyways, a paean is an epic poem or song. And I will neither rhyme nor sing, so that's your loss. Last time I gave this talk, I've been giving this talk, I was sort of traveling around the mid-Atlantic giving this talk at meetups. The last time I gave this talk, someone compared me to a monk, which I thought was really cool. And what he was saying was that like, I was advocating we all lived in like furnitureless wood cells or like caves. But I liked it because it made me feel like I was sort of traveling the land, spreading illumination to the people, which is pretty grandiose, but it's not really what I'm doing. It's something along those lines. So I want to talk about this idea. I saw this on a presentation, frameworks save time. And I think we buy into that concept pretty consistently as a people. A lot of us build with Rails. And I think that's okay. Frameworks do frequently save time. We also buy into this thing, convention over configuration. So, you know, put sort of the handcuffs on me, but that's okay, I'll follow the rules, and I theoretically reap great rewards and benefits. And then the third thing that you hear a lot is, avoid not invented here syndrome. Who doesn't know what not invented here means? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, programmers like to say, that he's really not invented hearing something. If someone's like, the solution exists, it's open source, but I'm going to build it myself instead, just cuz. And it's sort of like this people call it like digital nationalism, which I think is an unsubtle way of describing it, but that's what people call it, and I can't stop them yet. So this gets reinforced a couple ways. First is through social pressure. So you hear stuff like Rails is omakase. That's yet another word that I don't know how to pronounce. That's our dear leader. Or you hear the dude sitting next to you who's like, oh yeah, I've done that before. You just need to install Capybara and you'll be good to go. You get it from client pressure a lot, which is, oh come on, there's got to be something for Splay already, right? That's your client who's pretty cheap. And then you get the project manager that totally knows, and he's like, listen, I got to take Radiant upstairs. I sold them on you guys based on Radiant. And you're like, Radiant? Are you kidding? And there's you pressure, which is when you tell yourself, I don't really have the time or the energy or the capacity to build a thing, which is total bullshit. You absolutely do. But these things all kind of distill into behavior that I think is summed up by my friend Micah Cooper, who's brilliant. If you guys ever have a chance to hug Micah Cooper, do it. Tell him it's from me. Does anyone know Micah? Yeah, he works for HashRocket. Don't hold it against him. So he said, quote, you're more inclined to use a tool when you don't understand what it's doing. Which is fine, to a certain extent, I think. I couldn't have invented Rails. I'm happy to use it. I don't know how the router works. I know there was a kerfuffle about how the router works years ago, and somebody fixed it, right? That's great. I'm not the person who's going to fix it. I'm just sort of happy to be playing with the guys who might one day fix it, right? Like, I'm never getting called up to the majors. I'm cool with that. I'm going to use Rails. But there is a downside to that level of blind faith, and that's what this talk is about. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at a very simple gemfile.lock. This is for a website, for a friend. You can't really see it. There's about great, all my code samples are going to be unreadable. Slight panic. Okay, 13 gems. This is what gemfile.lock looks like. Right now we're at 35 lines of instructions, 70 lines, 105 lines, 140 lines, 158 lines of instructions for my 13 gems. So Part of this is good. It means that things are modular, that I can rip out a gem, or maybe I can't. But I wrote this thing called lock parse to maybe take a look at this and dig in and evaluate why exactly this is happening. So as you can see, for my 13 gems, there were 61 total libraries required for those 13 gems to work. So that's 3.6, 3.7 dependencies per gem. And then the really interesting thing, here's a table showing various projects put through lock parse at my company. The really interesting thing is that on average it's about 2 instructions per library, and that's 2 version instructions. So that you wind up with things like this, where a thing requires one thing and then it also requires another thing. The scary thing about this is I actually wrote the gem that is doing this, and I had no idea why this was happening. And that's dependency hell. We've all been there. And it's really just the beginning, because the main issue that I have with the way that we've begun to work is that frameworks are taking shit from us. And this is what they're taking. The first is money, which we like, energy, which we need, control, which we may or may not have to begin with, performance, I mean, we're using Ruby, so nobody panic about performance. Our reputation suffers as a result of this. The stability, and I'm not talking about, does my app crash? We'll get into that later. And most importantly, we're being robbed of our own dignity by doing this. And that sucks. Because we used to be creative professionals, and that's starting to fade away. So let's talk. The first thing, money, and its best friend, which is time. So you get the guy who's like, hey bro, I need an MVP in a week, right? And not getting into how insane that is. Your knee-jerk reaction is, cool, uninstall device, because authentication is a core part of this app. And now people can log in. And it's great. You get your MVP out in a week, everybody's happy, and then the guy calls you back and he's like, cool, add subdomains for me. Scope the users to a subdomain. And so you go, fuck, and then you go to Google, and you ask Google how you scope things by subdomains and authentication, and then you wind up creating a multi-tenant device strategy that sort of talks to a controller, but is grabbing shit from a thread. And then you tell Warden, what the fuck is Warden? Warden shows up and it's like, hey, you need to tell me about this thing that you told Devise about so that I can know to use the thing when you want me to use it, which you have to reboot your Rails app every single time you change this thing that is telling Warden how to work. And then, oh yeah, you gotta stuff that shit in the thread in the first place in your controller. So now you've done the following things. You've configured Warden on behalf of Devise. You've broken MVC, and you've done it twice. Why? Why did you do that? There's a really simple solution, right? User is, if I can find a user basically who authenticates on a subdomain, then set them to the session. And the pundits always look at the slide and they go, oh yeah, you got a man in the middle tag and you didn't do your controller right. And it's like, dude, add reset session and relax. It's not that complicated. When you have control over this stuff, you can set it up your way. And then on the model end, of course, you've got the authenticate method where it goes and finds the user, ensures that the password matches, use a little decrypt fun. I mean, has secure password now, which handles like a big chunk of this for you, so an enormous amount of this is already given to you, and you don't need Devise to do it. And as a result, now you know things. You know exactly what's happening in your app. You know exactly where to change how you scope users in your app, and you know how to authenticate users. When did knowing how authentication works become a dark art? I mean, it's like the fundamental concept that drives so many of our apps is that we have users that use them. The second thing is energy. And frustration, because the more time you spend throwing energy at a problem and not solving it, the more frustrated you get. I'll give you an example. This is one Micah and I worked on. I have to communicate with a SOAP service using sign requests. So you go, you figure out how you talk to SOAP services with Ruby, and it's, oh, gem savant, which is a third word that I don't know how to pronounce properly. But oh shit, version 2, they don't sign requests anymore. So what we're going to do is, we're going to dig through the source, we're going to figure out exactly where we might want to sign a request. So we're going to fork the API, fork the gem, modify its internal API. We're going to send the maintainer a pull request, who, by the way, removed code signing because he didn't like the format of the tests for the pull request to the guy who added code signing in the first place, and you're potentially, but not definitely, going to get told to screw off. That's the bottom line. So now you've got this fork of your gem that you're bundling every time you run your app. It's slowly diverging from what Savon is becoming. When you could have done something a lot simpler. You could have used Wasabi, which comes with Savon, to parse the WSDL. You could have used no query to build XML, holy shit, whoever thought of doing something like that. And you can use OpenSSL, which comes with everything, to actually sign the request. Not that big of a deal. And now you know how message signing works, how your requests are built, and more than you ever wanted to know about SOAP. Right? You're advancing, you're learning, which is the point. The next thing is control. Because we are theoretically craftspeople, we're supposed to care about details. So then the guy comes to you and he says, I really want my app to be responsive, because that's what he says. That's what they all say. So then you knee-jerk, I'm going to install Twitter Bootstrap because it gives me a responsive grid. Pretty sweet. And here's a fun, I just timed some pre-compilation. I added Bootstrap to the site that I showed you the gem file from earlier, just for shits and giggles. So I added Bootstrap. This is before. That's a 21-second pre-compile. That's frightening enough as it is. And then this is after. It doesn't even compile. Shit. So you got to go fix stuff, get Bootstrap to work, derp, derp, derp. And then, and I've actually seen this, you wind up with stuff like this. Can you guys guess what's going to happen next? Yeah, 2 CSS preprocessors in one project. Does anyone else have an issue with that? No, you guys all have your hands down. You are all implicitly guilty as a result. And then the result is that you've got these goddamn Jolly Rancher buttons. Do you guys not weep when you see these goddamn Jolly Rancher buttons? I am so sick of the Twitter Bootstrap Jolly Rancher button, and it's because the easy way of controlling Bootstrap is you can change the flavor of your Jolly Rancher, but you sure as shit can't change anything else about that button without a lot of hacks. All of this because you wanted a responsive website. Well, check it out. 16 lines, you've got a responsive grid. It's not that complicated. It's really pretty straightforward, and now you know exactly how CSS grids work and where to change your grid later when the gutter size changes or whatever. Next is performance. Like I said, really slow enough already. This is just, this is a client project that we inherited. We get a lot of rescue projects. What? How did that happen? How do we live in this world where this is okay? Because I charge by CPU cycle, so if I'm sitting there waiting for this shit to happen, my client's getting billed. Next up is reputation. Because every bug that someone introduces to your code base because you were lazy is your bug too. And back to our old friend Devise, we can talk all day about Devise if you want. So okay, Devise needs a security update. These slides are a little bit old. That's the it's 3.0 now. I don't know if you guys use Devise. So all right, it's time to fix it. Update the whole thing. Run my tests. Run my integration tests, because unlike the rest of you people, I still separate my integration tests from my unit tests. Make your commit. Call the client. Hey, so gonna take the website offline because I introduced a security flaw because I was lazy. Turn Heroku maintenance on. Wait 25 minutes for Bootstrap to precompile. Turn Heroku maintenance off. Open it. Smoke test it. Drink a beer. Drink whiskey. That's what you need at the end of that, right? If you actually built authentication yourself, you know what the actually invented here solution is? It's done! That's really that simple. You've done it. Congratulations. Up next is stability. You probably don't let one client represent 80% of your business, because if you did and that client disappeared, then you'd go out of business. A lot of times, we let libraries be very core and functional to our app, and we let them just take it over and live there. And a good example of this is payment processing. I don't know if you guys remember back in the day with Active Merchant, when everyone was like, old school gateway is awesome, and then Braintree came along, and everyone was like, REST, gateway is awesome, and then Stripe came along, and they were like, Stripe, it's for developers. And has anybody here used Stripe? You don't write code when you use Stripe. You just put JavaScript on things, and then you like copy out the thing that they give you in their documentation, and you're done. That's very straightforward. I think it's brilliant, because Stripe does a great job of convincing me that I want to use it, and it costs way more than a regular gateway would. And I'm not writing code. But you can write a gateway thing. You can't really see the code here, but this is a 27-line. You can make any request against any gateway with this. It uses HTTP party, which I realize is, or HTTP party, I don't know. I realize that's passé now, I'm sorry. Same concept, background jobs. Does anybody remember Spawn? Spawn was cool as shit. It was just like, hey, fork it and do stuff. That was all. It was just like a shortcut for fork. It was awesome. And then there was Background RB, Beanstalk, and Blade Job, and Rescue. And I guess now the cool kids are using Sidekick. I'm not a cool kid. I'm still using Rescue. Sorry. So every time you change this technology for any reason, and there are always good reasons to, you're doing shit like this. Now, I've actually never run that through an app before because I'm not an animal, but you could wind up doing that. Or you could wind up writing a simple API. Hey, I wrote an API that queues things. It doesn't care how it queues things. It'll just, you tell it how to queue things on the back end, and now my app doesn't have to change every time I change how I queue things. Pretty straightforward. So you've mitigated risk with an API over top of an API or your own money. And last up is dignity. Oh, dignity. Like we're programmers. We build things. We're not gluing together model airplanes. We're building software. And we have to act like it. And we've stopped acting like it. The not invented here pundits are going to tell you to gem install everything. And the result of that, and this is proven to me day after day, when people come in with a rescue project, and I have to figure out how to unfuck device, is maintenance and hacks. We've become maintenance people. That's not exciting. The other end of the spectrum, you can just create your own awesome sauce. And then you wind up with self-respect because you're learning, because you're building software. You feel pretty good about yourself, and your software is a lot better and a lot more stable. You know, there used to be this poetry to what we did, to the things that we created. And we can have that back. It's just code, right? You can write it. It's not that complicated. So then what I get whenever I give this talk is that people go, so reinvent all the things, right? And they're making fun of me. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we need to do it more than we do now. There's a gray area, which I realize can be uncomfortable. But we can navigate it. I've got some pretty straightforward tools for navigating it. There's using Rails, good idea. Using Devise, bad idea. Everything else in between is a gray area. You have to make up your own mind. Here's how I make up my own mind. I've sort of developed this little set of rules, and there's only 4. It's pretty straightforward. The first thing is know why. It's like, why do you need this library in the first place? What does it do that I can't do? And the second is, what do I gain from using it even if I can do it? Because, like, okay, maybe I could build Rails. I mean, the MERB guys did. I'm not as smart as them, but like maybe I could build a shitty something that did something on the internet and wasn't Rails. But I'm not going to, right? I have a reason for making that commitment. The second thing is learn from open source software. Don't use it without knowing what it does. If you haven't read the source of it, why on earth would you ever put it in your application? That's insane to me. I mean, we talked about gem signing last night. Why on earth would you ever put unproven code in your app? It's dangerous. It's stupid. Don't do it. The next thing is time boxing. Just spike on a library. See how far you get. I mean, I wrote that pretty please thing in like a couple hours. It was not that big of a deal. And I was shocked. I was very proud of myself, but I was shocked. And that's when I kind of was like, oh, like a lot of the stuff, I could make it do the things that I needed to do without relying on somebody else that does 20 extra things devised. So, rule number 4 is just make it pretty. Is just create an API to an API, and boom, you're done. It's not that big of a deal. But everyone has got something they want to tell me about why I'm wrong, and I refuse to listen. That makes me an idiot. But I'm here talking to you, so that counts for something. So, the number 5 reason everyone says not invented here is the right way to go. I need Bootstrap because I can't design. And I say to you, neither can other designers. But they can copy shit and so can you. And here's a little bit of a bonus for you guys. I'm going to teach you how to design. This is a website that I designed from scratch. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. The first thing is put a full-width header on there. All the cool kids have a full-width header. Some of them are white nowadays, so you can't tell, but if you inspect it in Chrome, you'll see it's a full-width header. It's there. It goes all the way across. Up next, rounded corners. Everybody likes rounded corners, and now this design is already dated because it has 3-dimensional stuff, and Apple was like, fuck skeuomorphism, we're not doing that anymore, so we can't do that anymore either, so I'll have to make it flat someday, but for the time being, it's got 3 dimensions, but it does have rounded corners. And the third thing, absolute worst case scenario, you've set your header 100% width and give everything a slightly rounded corner and it still looks shitty. Wood grain. Oh my God, wood grain. You can add wood grain to the worst app, and it is a piece of art when you're done. The fourth reason, I guess, is I don't have time to spend on authentication is the one that I always hear, because people get really defensive when I shit on device, and I'm sorry if I'm angering people by doing that. But then either you don't actually have time to do your job, or you're overestimating how long it's going to take. I mean, nobody's going to come to you and say, we want you to rebuild Nokogiri. But someone is going to come to you and say, I need people to be able to log into my website, and I need that to work in the future. The third reason, and this one I actually like, because I think this is an intelligent response, it's I'm lazy, and that's a virtue in programmers, and I agree. I don't let any of my employees engage in over-engineering. I don't like it. That's totally true, but when you decide that you're going to glue together all of these pieces of your model airplane, I kind of want to be like, well, you're going to have to do more than that, right? It's not do nothing, do more than that. And I have actually developed a mathematical proof that demonstrates that doing nothing is wrong. So first, being lazy at the wrong time leads to technical debt. Technical debt is irresponsible. Being irresponsible is not virtuous. Shut up. The number 2 reason everyone wants to gem install everything is they say, people smarter than you say, don't reinvent the things. That's true, because a lot of people a lot smarter than me say, hey man, don't engage in digital nationalisms, don't reinvent the things. They do, it's true. But then they invent it themselves. What they're doing is they're robbing us all of the opportunity to build cool shit because we're like, yeah, you know what, Factory Girl's good enough, and HashRocket's like, yeah, Factory Girl's good enough. But we built Fabricator with exactly the same API, and it does exactly the same things, but it's called Fabricator, so use that instead, right? They're actually building these things. These people now know how to build a fixture library. I don't, because I never tried. And the number 1 reason that people always complain about what I've talked about is, what is this, and it's just like a constant stream of like, why do you hate gems? Why do you hate software? Why do you shit on people? And that's not what I'm doing. I apologize if that's what it sounds like I'm doing. What I'm saying is simply, we can do better. So, sort of to wrap things up, the crux of what I'm saying. Value is not equivalent to install count on rubygems.org. Although how many people check the install count on their libraries? I do that like every day. I'm not proud of it. Nobody installs my shit either. Value in libraries isn't an objective thing. It's a subjective thing that you can measure, I think, personally, by 1, how well it's actually going to solve the problem today, 2, whether or not it solves that problem completely, and whether or not it solves way more than that problem, and 3, how hard do I have to fight it tomorrow? If it fits in nicely to my workflow, I've got no problem with it. If it's going to create issues for me, I do. And ultimately, the world needs alternatives, right? Like, who has a monopoly on open source software? It's a crazy concept to me. And you can do literally anything with Ruby, except for subclass fix none. Has anyone tried doing that? You can't do that. It's like the elephant graveyard. Simba, you must never go there. It's a disaster. But you are smarter than the mob. At least I think, sometimes. And that's really the important thing here, is to build the shit yourself, and break it, and have fun. That's all I got. Thank you guys.